Should we abolish the Federal Reserve? Representative Thomas Massey thinks so. He's introduced the Federal Reserve Board of Abolition Act, aiming to dismantle the cornerstone of the U.S. economic policy since 1913. This bill here, backed by 23 Republican co-sponsors like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, this bold move targets the Fed's role in the crippling inflation. Critics argue that the Fed has overstepped, causing economic instability rather than preventing it. But without a detailed replacement plan, can the U.S. fully recover without a central bank? Is this a solution to economic freedom or a step closer towards chaos? Today in this video, I'm going to go deeper and highlight how the Federal Reserve has been effective in accomplishing their goals. However, from looking at this graph here, it just hasn't benefited the average person or we the people. So let's talk about this. Just like that, the weather changed on me that fast. Regardless, in this video, I want to shine a light on the subject first and give some context as to how we arrived at this point, and then offer strategic methods based on what's already happening to try to reverse engineer this current crisis we're facing. And so as I went through this bill, it still leaves a lot of questions as to what they're trying to accomplish and why now. Then again, it might be obvious. So the recent introduction of this Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act, or HR 8421, as it's often referred to, has stirred some significant discussions and controversy. This bill proposes to dismantle the Federal Reserve System, which has been a cornerstone of the U.S. economic policies since its establishment in 1913. And on May 15th, Representative Massey posted on X.com inquiring whether he should introduce legislation to abolish the U.S. Federal Reserve. And of course, the poll garnered over 115,000 votes, with a significant 86% majority opting to end the Fed. And of course, everybody and their mother had a comment to put on here, of which a lot of them are extremely funny. This legislation has garnered substantial support from certain factions, notably drawing the endorsements from over 23 Republican co-sponsors. We have Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona. We have Lauren Boebert from Colorado, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Missouri, Florida, Texas, more Arizona. So an assortment of concerned representatives within the states that are more anti-federal government at this current moment and more pro-state levels legislation when it comes to money. However, despite this support, the bill faces significant obstacles, including a Democratic-controlled Senate and an almost certain veto from President Biden. So let me start off by saying, it will never pass, not even be considered. So it's not so much about having it pass at this point of the Great Reset, but more about getting the average Joe to recognize the dangers of the privatization of our nation's money supply and how to reverse engineer the monetary manipulative practices that have been against the people for over 100 years now. First question we should consider is, what does the Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act actually propose? In a nutshell, it aims to abolish the Federal Reserve System and its governing bodies after a one-year transition period. This transition will involve an orderly liquidation of Federal Reserve assets, with the net proceeds transferred to the U.S. Treasury. The bill's proponents argue that this radical move would address the issue they attribute to the Federal Reserve, primarily its role in creating what they see and what we're all feeling as far as this crippling currency erosion, or inflation as they like to call it, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID relief cost was $5.2 trillion. That's more than all our wars since 2001 combined, and more than our most expensive war, which is World War II, which cost $4.7 trillion. And so if you go all the way to the point here, when COVID first was unleashed here in this country, the currency injection started at $8.3 billion, went to $225 billion, all the way to the CARES Act, which is $2.2 trillion. Then we had a 248-day layover. And then under new administration, we have the consolidated appropriations of $920 billion. And then a 70-day period, we had $1.9 trillion injected in the American Rescue Plan. And if we were to break this all down, this is what it looks like. This is where the $5.2 trillion that's stated here has gone. To the far left, $1 trillion went to the populace in the form of stimulus checks. Then we have $4.2 trillion that made its way to all these other expenditures, which you can see on the screen here, which included at the very top here, Obamacare, landlords and rent, $1.7 trillion in indirect payments. We had $885 billion in unemployment, $440 billion in vaccines, $440 to schools, and $226 in the PPP loans. And so that's just a quick synopsis of some funds that was dished out, which is more reason why these representatives want to make some changes at this current moment. So two, now I want to provide more of a historical context and rationale behind the need to rethink the Federal Reserve banking system. The Federal Reserve was created in response to financial panics, particularly the Panic of 1907. And before this time period here, there was a banking panic every 5 to 6 years, going all the way back to the cancellation of the second bank that came about under former President Andrew Jackson. So banking panics is something that was common before we had a central bank, and they're still prevalent to this very day. But the whole idea, sold to the public, fraudulently might I add, was to provide the nation with a safer and more flexible and more stable monetary and financial system. Yet, over the years, the Federal Reserve's role has expanded to include managing inflation, regulating banks, maintaining financial stability, and providing banking services for depository institutions and the government. So I can understand how Representative Massey and his supporters argue that the Federal Reserve has overstepped its bound and has become a source of economic instability rather than a safeguard. They contend that the Federal Reserve monetary policies, particularly the significant increase in the money supply, referring to the M1 here, in February 2020, which stood at 3.9 trillion or so, all the way to just 3 months later at $16.245.5 trillion. Which has led to the rampant inflation and the devaluation of our currency. A lot of the critics of the Federal Reserve point to its actions during the 2008 financial crisis and the recent pandemic as an example of the central bank exacerbating economic problems through aggressive and corrupted monetary intervention practices. Little do the average person realize that clearly the premise of a central banking is quite obvious. This is what compounded inflation looks like through monetary policy, which was their goal all along, and it was disguised as Federal Reserve mandates and the creation of bank panics through overseeing loose or extremely tight monetary interest rates that have been the primary reasons for the boom and bust cycles that we've experienced for the last 100 years. And as you can see from the very first president that actually signed the Federal Reserve Act, which is Woodrow Wilson, all the way to the current administration of Joe Biden, every president's played their part. So clearly the Fed has been 100% successful, just not for the users and savers of their asset, which we've all grown to know as the dollar, aka the Federal Reserve note. So proponents of this HR 8421 believe that dismantling the Federal Reserve would restore monetary control to the people and prevent a small group of unelected official from wielding excess of power over the economy. But then what? Combing through this document here, there's no solution. There's no strategies here. And so basically a glaring omission in the Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act, there's no follow-up steps as to what will actually replace the Federal Reserve's function. So the bill calls for the end of the Fed's role in monetary policy and currency issuance, but provide no further alternative framework for these critical functions. So to suggest to end the Fed on one hand, give one or two things on how to abolish them, but not offer something on the other end of this, is not too beneficial to say the least. So this gap raises serious questions about how the U.S. economy would manage without a central bank, given that our current U.S. Treasury, who's ran by Janet Yellen, a former central banker, still would not be operating in our country's best interest. So it just leaves more question as to how the U.S. economy would manage without a central bank to regulate money supply, control inflation, and act as a lender of last resort during financial crises. Because in order to prevent financial crises, that means the banking sector, the way that it's set up now, would also have to be restructured completely. A lot of critics of the abolition proposal argue that without a central bank, the U.S. could turn to a period of economic uncertainty and heightened risk. Even though this bill is a good idea in theory, I still want to reiterate that the bill will not be passed. But then again, I don't really think it has to be passed at the federal level because we the people are supposed to be the government. And so far, several states have done a good job of reintroducing sound money legislation back into the equation. My last interview with JP Cortez from the Sound Money Defense League gave us a good rundown on the states making all the big moves at this current moment. During this interview, he gave us a complete rundown as to which states are progressing faster than others. And as you can see from this map here, there's a lot of activity happening right now. So if you guys want to find out more about this interview, I'll leave a link in the description for you to check it out if you haven't already. At the end of the day, the only way real change will come is from the state level down. And the best example of the state which is doing the most is Utah. Utah has turned into a model for the nation. They have been quietly championing sound money principles for years, making significant strides to promote the use of gold and silver as a viable currency alternative for the people to get a hold of. And a couple of their key initiatives happened to be in 2011 when they passed the Utah Legal Tender Act, which basically reinstated and reminded the citizens of what gold and silver really is, which is money. And then in 2024, just this year, they started holding gold and silver as their state treasury reserves, which allows the state to allocate gold and silver to their retirement and pension funds and things of that nature. And then the most recent one is the exclusion of CBDCs from the legal tender role within the state there. And so they're one of a few other states now that's making it known that they will not be acknowledging CBDC as currency for the people in those states. And to take even more action, they facilitated private sound money solutions spurred by the private sector with a large variety of initiatives, such as the United Precious Metals Association, which treats U.S. minted coins, either gold or silver, as actual dollar units that are not priced in Federal Reserve note terms. So it allows you to be able to deposit funds into their depository, treating one silver American Eagle as $1. And there's a lot of interesting information if you guys want to check them out as well. And then they got the creation of the gold backs, which are a voluntary gold-backed currency of paper that's infused with actual physical gold. This innovation, along with supportive environments for alternatives, has made a world of difference. And they've also dived into the digital currency space, linking gold and silver to the blockchain with alternative payment systems such as Quintric, which takes the best aspects of precious metals, cryptocurrencies, and legal tender into one revolutionary patent-pending medium of exchange, which highlights more Utah's commitment to fostering sound money alternatives. So at the end of the day, the idea of abolishing the Fed is a great idea, but it will boil down to the ability of the states to take back their lawful lawful right to coin and issue the people's money the way that it was intended before our nation's money was captured by the private bankers. Yet, as I've always said, don't wait for a presidential candidate to make you any promises about how they're going to unravel this mess. Because as you can see here, when it comes to printing currency, the last 4 presidents all together have played a significant role in allowing the Federal Reserve to do what they do best, which is print currency, as a result of our government going on these astronomical debt binges. And so whether it was Bush, Obama, and look what was allowed under Trump era, that big red bar is what I just showed you a couple graphs ago, up until this current moment of Biden, there's no way they can stop borrowing because that's how the system operates. As always, this is not financial advice of any sort. This is just one man's opinion. The best thing you can do, as I always say, is continue to take matters into your own hands. Why? Because purchasing power matters. It starts with education and ends with getting your weight up. So if you stuck around long enough, then I'm sure you can understand the sense of urgency that this subject matter should have. And whenever opportunities are presented to me as an entrepreneur, I study them, dissect them, and make sure they are valid. With that being the case, just like a few years ago when I put together the RTD Gold Team, offering cash gold 1 gram gold cards, as well as the 1/10 of a gram gold notes for the community to stack. I'm now starting what I call the RTD Silver Team, where you can automate your silver stack monthly and redeem some of your extra fiat notes. All this silver price activity we're witnessing right now continues to intensify. For those who are open to opportunities, then check out the link that gives more insight into this opportunity here in the description, and I'll be putting more information together in the next couple days or so and showing you some physical weight that I put on automation. And so at the end of the day, abolishing the Fed sounds good in theory. It could have never been more timely, but then again, at this current moment in the midst of this great reset, it's my opinion that it's too late on the national level. But state by state, we have representatives out there fighting for the people, and I can commend that. But it's all up to you. What are you going to do to protect your purchasing power or whatever is left of it before stuff really gets out of hand? And definitely by the end of this year, the gold and silver prices will be extremely high, to say the least. And so any opportunity I come across that I find value in, I'll share with you guys and let you guys do what you must with it. But other than that, if you found value today, hit that thumbs up button, share this video so more people can find out what's really going on, strategies that's taking place within the states, and more importantly, the opportunity that's in front of all of us to get physical while we can, or while still affordable somewhat. But anyway, just share my thoughts. Curious to hear your thoughts. Share some thoughts in the comments section, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Enjoy your day.